All right, so we've just talked about that absolutely explosive growth that happens in the first year of life. It's incredible. But what happens next? Well, that's what we're diving into now. That critical bridge between infancy and childhood, covering the toddler and preschool years. And let me tell you, this is a time of massive change. But the biggest shifts, they aren't the ones you can see on a growth chart.
Remember this? In our last discussion, we saw how an infant can literally triple their birth weight in the first year, packing on about 15 pounds. That's a rate of growth they'll never see again in their entire lives. But once they hit that first birthday, things start to change. The body kind of taps the brakes. And the difference is pretty shocking. Check this out. Between ages 1 and 2, a totally healthy kid might only gain about 6 pounds. This dramatic drop is what we call the Great Slowdown. And believe me, it changes everything about how we need to approach their nutrition. So while the body's physical growth is slowing way down, something else is hitting the accelerator, big time, and that's the mind. You see, this physical slowdown isn't a bad thing at all. It actually frees up a ton of energy that gets rerouted to fuel this huge leap in how they think, feel, and see the world. Okay, so let's be clear about who we're talking about. We're looking at two groups that kind of overlap. We've got toddlers, who are from 1 to 3 years old, and then we have our preschoolers from 3 to 5. The basic nutritional needs are pretty similar, but we're definitely going to point out some key differences as we go. If there's one word that defines this entire stage, it's this one: autonomy. This is that deep, powerful drive to say, I can do it myself. You know the one. They're figuring out that they're their own little person with their own ideas, and they are desperate to test out their new powers on the world around them.
And where does this desire for independence show up first, and let's be honest, most famously? Yep, the dinner table. It becomes the first real battleground. All of a sudden, that baby who would happily eat anything you gave them now refuses food they loved just last week. Here's the secret, though. It's not really about the broccoli. It's about control.
A perfect example of this is something called a food jag. You know, when your little cousin will only eat macaroni and cheese for lunch and dinner for a solid week, that's a food jag. It's a classic toddler move for showing their independence, and while it can drive parents absolutely crazy, it's a totally normal part of their development. Okay, so this whole slowdown thing brings us to a really, really important shift in thinking. Because their growth has slowed, their appetite has probably shrunk right along with it. This means the nutritional quality of the food they eat becomes way more important than the quantity. Every single bite has to count, especially when it comes to fueling that super fast developing brain. So that's the big question, right? How in the world do you pack all the nutrients they need for that growing brain and body into a much smaller amount of food? Well, the answer is all about focusing on getting the right balance of the big stuff, the macronutrients, and the small stuff, the micronutrients. Now let's take a look at the numbers. You can see their needs for protein and fiber go up as they get older, which totally makes sense. But look at the row for fat. See that? The recommended percentage of calories from fat actually goes down after age 3. There's a super important reason for that initial high number. And here's why. We'll call it the fat rule. For kids under 2, that high-fat diet isn't just for energy. It's a critical, non-negotiable building block for their brain. Fat is essential for forming the myelin sheath. That's the fatty coating around nerve fibers that acts like insulation on a wire, letting brain signals travel super fast. This is exactly why we recommend whole milk, not low fat, for this age group. Okay, let's circle back to that chart for a second and talk about fiber. This is one of those nutrients that most preschoolers just are not getting enough of, especially the picky eaters. And it's usually for a pretty simple reason. They're not eating enough fruits, veggies, and whole grains. So that brings us right into our next section, where we're going to zoom in on these key nutrient danger zones. We're going to look at what's often missing from their diets, but just as important, we'll look at what they're often getting way, way too much of. It's a two-sided coin. When it comes to deficiencies, there are 3 usual suspects. First, iron, which is absolutely critical for brain development. Then there's calcium, the undisputed star player during these peak bone-building years. And finally, vitamin D, which you can think of as calcium's essential sidekick. Without it, the body just can't absorb calcium properly. Now, speaking of iron, I want to talk about a really fascinating and kind of weird risk. It's called milk anemia. And I know what you're thinking. That sounds completely backward, right? How can milk, of all things, lead to a deficiency? Well, the risk kicks in when a toddler starts regularly drinking more than 16 ounces of cow's milk a day. And that's just 2 regular-sized glasses. For a little kid who loves milk, it is incredibly easy to go way over that amount. So here's how it happens. It's basically a 1-2 punch. First, milk is super filling, but it has almost no iron. So a kid fills up their tiny tummy on milk, and there's just no room left for iron-rich foods like meat or beans. Second, for some kids, too much milk can actually irritate the lining of their intestines, which makes it harder for their body to absorb whatever little iron they do get. And this really highlights the modern paradox of the toddler diet. On one side, we see way too much sodium and added sugars, mostly from processed snacks and drinks. And on the other side, they're not getting enough key nutrients like potassium, fiber, and vitamin E, all the things you find in whole foods like fruits and veggies. And let's be really clear about the problem with all that added sugar. It's not just about empty calories. Added sugar is the #1 cause of cavities in young children. Those sweetened drinks, think juice, chocolate milk, soda, are the biggest culprits. Just switching to plain milk or water can be a massive win for their long-term dental health. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the what and why. Now it's time to get practical. In this last section, we're going to talk about the playbook, the single best strategy for navigating this phase of independence, plus a vital support system that helps families actually put these goals into practice. If you remember just one thing from this whole explainer, please let it be this. This is Ellen Satter's division of responsibility, and it is a game changer. Think of it like a job description. The adult's job is to be in charge of what food is served, when it's served, and where it's served. The child's job? To decide how much to eat from the food you offered and whether they're going to eat it all. This simple framework gives them the autonomy they crave while making sure they have good choices, and it basically ends those mealtime power struggles. Now, of course, a great strategy only works if you have access to nutritious food in the first place. And that's where a huge public health program called WIC comes in. WIC is a federal program that does more than just provide food. It offers specific, nutrient-dense foods, plus vital nutrition education and healthcare referrals for families who need it most. And the benefits of WIC are not just a nice idea. They are proven time and time again. Decades of research show that kids in the WIC program have better outcomes all around. We're talking reduced infant mortality, better growth, and, get this, huge reductions in that exact same iron deficiency anemia we just talked about. It even leads to better intellectual development down the road. It's just powerful proof of how much this early nutrition really matters. So, as we've seen, the toddler and preschool years are all about navigating that great slowdown and building a healthy foundation one meal at a time. But their world doesn't stay small forever. Eventually, they leave the dinner table and head out into the world. So that leads us to our next big question. What happens when these kids, with their new eating habits, step into the schoolyard with all its new foods, new friends, and new pressures? We'll tackle that next.